concert tours worldwide, 11 studio albums that span 4 decades, the Titans of Thrash remain the standard by which all other metal is measured. We begin with a 1984 classic from their second album, For Whom the Bell Tolls, followed by the 1992 tour anthem, Wherever I May Roam. And now, let's turn down the house and light up the stage with the Auburn University Marching Band and their show, Metallica.
It is not Thursday evening, but it is a day before the greatest rivalry in sports, if not just college sports. The Iron Bowl is at hand, and yes, we must talk about it, we must preview it, and we must predict it. Let's get into all those different things right now. Warwick, everybody, welcome back to another edition of E2C Network Live, where we get together and we talk about the Auburn experience. What is the Auburn experience? Well, it's Auburn sports, Auburn culture, and Auburn family stuff. An easier way to say it is if it's orange and blue, it's what we do. So thank you so much for joining us in what we do today. Hope you all have had a great Thanksgiving and Black Friday for those of you that are out braving the shopping. I hope you guys had a great couple of off days, but we are back to handle some business on this particular live stream. So whether you're here live or whether you're on the replay, we appreciate you joining us in our preview and prediction show for Auburn versus Alabama, the Iron Bowl, the greatest game in college football, the greatest rivalry in sports. We are going to walk through some information you may want to know about the matchup, the game, go into those things, and then move into a prediction time where we'll walk through some different scenarios and talk about what we think may or may not happen with the Iron Bowl for this edition, and obviously end with a score prediction. We'd love to hear from you all, though, so make sure as you're coming into the chat, even if it's not live, make sure you smash the like button. It's a huge help for us. Lets people know that we're live so they can take part in our conversation here. And obviously love to know your thoughts as we go throughout the stream this evening. So as you can tell, we're not in our normal location. I want to obviously acknowledge that right away. Sound may be a little bit off too. So appreciate your understanding and patience of that, traveling for the holidays and spending some time with family. So we're making do with when we can do it and how we can do it today. So hope everything is coming through all right for you guys. Let me know if there's anything that needs to be addressed feedback-wise, all those different things. We have a lot to talk about, a lot of interesting opinions out there, I think, about this matchup and about who may or may not win. And we certainly want to hear from so many of you. We got some fine people already checking in from across and on multiple spaces, checking in with us to talk about the Iron Bowl. So before we get into the preview, how's everybody feeling? What's the temperature of the room? I think obviously we're going to hear mainly from Auburn fans. And I know that we do have some Alabama fans that check in from time to time. Don't be afraid to be vocal as long as you are being productive in your conversations here. Certainly that's welcome as well. But I'm trying to gauge the temperature of both fan bases, because after spending some time with family, the temperature on the Alabama side, I think, seems to be very concerned and very worried, which I find a little bit interesting. I'm not buying into what I call the rat poison of them saying that they're concerned that they're going to lose or that Auburn actually may win this thing or anything like that. But certainly, I do think that this will be a matchup which will be a lot more interesting than most people were talking about at the beginning of the season. To give you some frame of reference where I was at the beginning of the season, my preview and predictions for a whole outlook for the season, I predicted that Auburn would lose to Alabama in the Iron Bowl in those early predictions in a close matchup in Tuscaloosa. I would say that we are sitting at a time at the end of the season where both teams have underperformed, but proportionally so compared to where I thought they might both be at the beginning of the season. Maybe a little bit more of an upward trend for Auburn at this time, just slightly. So that might give you an idea of maybe where I'm heading with my prediction, but we've got some things to talk about and hash out before then. So if you've got thoughts about things, please do jump in and let us know. I do want to give you some information to start off the show, though, because I think it's always important for us to have some stuff to go off of, just in the off chance that maybe you guys don't have the information. I'm going to move this table out a little bit. I feel like I'm knocking the camera around. See, this is the things that you don't get to see when you guys when I'm on the road. When we're at the studio, everything's all set up nice and neat. You don't get to see me messing and fumble with things like live. Okay, So let's bring up here on the screen. We're not going to do as extensive of an informational time for you guys, but I do want you to have some information to look at. Again, I always stress that this comes from the athletic department. You can find this for yourself if you want to dive into it more. And this is not the whole document of everything about the team, the matchup. These are just some of the more pertinent things. I don't have anything highlighted for you today, but we won't read every single thing that is on the screen. Wanted you to be able to have it, so maybe that you could pause, that you could stop and reflect on it a little bit if you need. Reflect sounds very profound for the Iron Bowl, but certainly I wanted you guys to be able to have the information if you so desire to do so, if you so desired to be able to dive into these things a little bit. So drop your comments and stuff as we go along. We'll come back and address them a little bit. All right, if we look here on the first page, this is going to be the main one that we look at. You obviously know how Auburn's season has gone if you've been paying attention. And for the most part, I think people are pretty aware about how Alabama's has gone as well, being ranked 13th currently at this time in the college football playoff, just outside of the actual 12 rankings. Not that that necessarily means that they're out of it, but 8-3, 4-3. How many people thought that Alabama would be 8-3 coming into this game? I would say I felt like it could be a possibility, but not a high possibility. So that's a very interesting thing as well. Juxtaposed to that, Auburn 5-6, very much out of what I thought was the highest possibilities. I talked a lot about in preseason about bell curves and where the highest likelihood was, what the other side of the bell curve was, what the less and less likely scenarios were. I definitely had a potential 5-7 finish if this does end in a loss as the lowest end of my bell curve, but that doesn't mean it wasn't possible. So there you go. But you kind of know where we're stacking up right now, how Hugh Freeze in his second season, Kalen DeBoer in his first season. The game is, I know, y'all want those night games, but 2:30 Central Time, ABC, Bryant-Denny Stadium in that cesspool of the South, as I call it. I know that in the song, most people refer to that as Alabama. You can look at some more information about the matchup here. It's tied 7-7 in Tuscaloosa. There was that stat put out there a little bit earlier this week about how Alabama has never beaten Auburn without Nick Saban in Tuscaloosa. It's a little bit misleading of a note because I think most people read that and assume that matchup's been happening in Tuscaloosa for the entirety of this. That's not true. So 2000 is really when we renewed going back there. The other times were much earlier in the rivalry, and that was only like twice. Other times, a lot in Birmingham, some more in Auburn. And thankfully, we got that matchup in Auburn finally brought there over time. But we know the series lead is at 50-37 for Alabama. Certainly, we made a dent in that in the early 2000s, and it has been risen back up under the Nick Saban era, but not too out in the distance, in the too distant, unreachable thing right there. Won't read through all of this stuff for you, but just wanted you to be able to have it. The 89th Iron Bowl, the 90th will be next year in Auburn. That'll be a fun one to be able to celebrate together. And you can look at more about how all the matchups go in Montgomery or in Birmingham or in all that kind of stuff, how Auburn does in November. That bottom section down there, I do think it's important for you to go and look at and kind of dive into because it gives you some perspective about how Auburn is stacking up in some key areas and how they are currently trending as an offense, especially. Talks about Jarquez, Cam Coleman, Keandre Lambert-Smith has been on this list forever. He's 9th nationally, 3rd in the SEC in yards per reception, having quite the outstanding year. Auburn ranking 13th nationally in yards per completion, 12th in the country in 6.71 yards per play, 12th nationally, averaging 8.8 yards per pass attempt, and 32nd, averaging 8.96 yards per rush. So in all those categories, almost in the top 25 and all of 32nd for that rushing limit. That's still the top. Well, that's beyond third. I mean, that's like the top. I think there's like 150 teams. It seems like now. I know it's less than that, but we'll call it the top 5th, somewhere in there, if I'm doing my math correctly, which I believe that I am. Okay, we'll move along. Again, you can pause and reflect on that if you need to. Will it not bring up the... Unfortunately, I think it is not going to have the sheets that I wanted. It got rid of the ones that I wanted on there. Anyway, I'll try to go find those while we're doing our matchup discussion. Normally, I show you the depth chart. There's not been a whole lot of change in that for us. And then there's some what I would call some matchup stuff. Let me see if I can pull that up for you since it did not save on our show draft thing today. I would definitely think that's something important for us to talk about and to think about in regards to how we're going to go about doing this. I'm so sorry, guys. I thought I had this all ready to go. That is the nature of being on the road and trying to scramble to get yourself in order here. Again, I would love to know your thoughts down there in the comments section as we go along. We'll get back to some of them in just a little bit and talk about them a little bit. But here we go. This is what we noted right here. Let me go all the way down here to this sheet. I won't be able to pull it up for you, but it's something that I can reference for you. Okay, team statistics comparatively. Points per game, Auburn is doing 29 per game. Alabama is doing 36.2. Auburn is allowing 20.7. Alabama is 17.5 in what they're allowing to their opponents. So that gives you some perspective there. Rushing, Auburn is 171.6 per game. Alabama is 181. They are allowing, Auburn is 110. Alabama is allowing 143.5. Passing, Auburn is getting 260. And Alabama is getting 238. They are allowing passing, Auburn is 209. Alabama is allowing 181. Total time of possession, Auburn is underneath them by 27:35 to 29:06. Hunter is your leader, obviously rushing with Alston. Thorne is your passing leader. Lambert, Smith, and Simmons have been leading the way for a while. Receiving, Mausi, Thompson, McLeod still lead the top of the defensive statistics in terms of tackling and things like that. Names to know for Alabama. Jalen Milroe, we obviously know that. 135 attempts, a net of 615, 4.6 rushing. That's rushing. We're doing 17 rushing touchdowns. Miller has a decent 107 attempts for 557 yards, 5.2 per carry, 7 touchdowns. Passing, Milroe is doing percentage-wise 65%, 5 touchdowns for 2,396 yards. If you want to compare, Peyton Thorne and him have very comparable stats in that passing area, and Peyton's a little bit better than him if you want to talk about that at all. Receiving, Ryan Williams, Bernard is going to be the second receiver, and then defense, Campbell, Lawson, and Moore are names to know there. Okay, so there is some information for you all. There is some things to think about. Not all of it. I told you it was going to be a little bit brief and abbreviated this time because we've got a lot to get into and we're in a different location. Want to make sure we get into the predictions portion of this show. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to bring up the ESPN predictor stuff, and we're going to talk about that as we get ready and get you guys geared up to talk about and predict this matchup, the 89th matchup of the Iron Bowl. So we're going to move this off of the screen here for you guys and get set up for us to return. Here we go. All right, preview and prediction part of our show now. ESPN has the line, or the spread, I guess I should say, listed at 10.5 in Alabama's favor. The way I always butcher this every time, so I think I'm saying it right. Alabama is favored to win by 10.5 points. So I would like to know from you guys, this is going to be a simple over or under. Or I guess you would say the cover or whatever. But let's say, what do you expect? Over or under that Alabama wins by 10.5? What are you taking? Put that in the chat right now. This is a test. This is a kind of getting you geared up, ready to roll for this particular show and getting used to typing out some things because we want a lot of interaction from you all in this particular show. While you're doing that, give me over under on that 10.5. Alabama wins. That's on ESPN right now. Already gave a shout out to a bunch of other people. Thomas says it's a winnable game. Depends on how we execute. I think it'll be a one-score game. Heard a lot of that from Alabama and Auburn people this week. I really think it's going to be a memorable Iron Bowl that'll be decided in OT. I can't take any more OT. I can't take any more OT in this particular game. We've got a call for a freeze warning, and Unbeaten Lake says communication is key. TJ said, I feel like teams that have beat Alabama have contained Milroe. If we stop him and our secondary continues to play well, the offensive side will continue to flow well. Don't disagree a lot with that there. All right, some of you have gotten your answers in. You're taking the under on this particular setup here. They are taking the under. I'm surprised no one is taking the over. I guess I shouldn't say I'm surprised, because a lot of people that I have talked to are anticipating a very, very close game and are anticipating this to be one of those that gives everybody nerves the entirety of the time it's being played. Sorry, I'm closing a few other things here. Let's do that. Sorry, I got to get rid of some things here so it doesn't mess up with our sound and stuff like that. What else here did we want to talk about from the ESPN? Right now, the ESPN predictor has it 87.7 Alabama and Auburn 12.3. Not surprised with that ESPN predictor right there. Travis is getting ahead of us. Please hold your score predictions till the end of the show. We're not asking for score predictions yet unless you have to go and can't stay the whole time with us. Hold the score predictions for now. Latrell War Eagle. Beaten Lake says it depends on which team shows up. Do we get the Auburn team from last week or from a couple weeks ago? And if Auburn is going to play like they did against, or Alabama is going to play like they did against LSU or against Oklahoma. It's a pretty good comparison right there. Which one is going to show up? The team that could only score 3 against Oklahoma. I think, let me before we get into our predictions part, I want to say this. And I've tried to say this to Alabama fans too. I don't think that they're given enough credit for how good defensively Oklahoma is. Brent Venables is a defensive-minded coach. So I don't think you should be shocked that the defensive side of an opponent like Oklahoma was impressive. The whole, they were able to get 24 on them, even at home, that's very disturbing for Alabama. So with that being said, let's do this part of the show. We're going to go through some different things. We're going to talk about it. We're going to go through predictions on offense, on defense, on special teams, and we're going to try to do it somewhat rapid fire tonight. So let's get right into it with our first offensive statistic. This is what I want to know from you specifically at this time. For offense, how many passing yards and passing touchdowns will Auburn score in the Iron Bowl this year? How many passing yards and passing touchdowns will you predict for Auburn in the Iron Bowl? Drop that in the chat right now, and we'll start diving into it with you guys to see what your opinions are. The reason we do this is it kind of helps people think through their score predictions a little bit better. Does what I think is going to happen in these scenarios match up with what I think the score prediction is? It usually helps me a whole lot to try to talk through some of these things, give you some information to think about and wrestle with. We already talked about it a little bit. Auburn is doing passing-wise 260.5 per game. Remember, we are ranked pretty high in most of those passing categories as well in the nation. Alabama is giving up 181.2. So where does it meet in the middle? There is a little bit of a gap there to note. What say you? Post that in the chat if you can. I know some of you guys are still just getting here. Would love to hear some of you guys' perspectives on that. How many passing yards and passing touchdowns? And I'll drop mine in here in a little bit. I think if Auburn shows up like we did versus A&M, we will be able to compete. We did well against Oklahoma offensively until those last 2 drives. We're not going to bring that back up. Yes, Marie, we got it the first time that there is a freeze warning. Thank you. Tucker says 234, 2 passing touchdowns. These are just passing yards and passing touchdowns. 225 and 2 touchdowns. We got 250 and 3 from Unbeaten Lake. 215 and 2. Remember, you might also be a little bit delayed as well. You might have to refresh your stream if you've gotten some ads and stuff. That might put you a little bit behind in chat if you feel like you're a little bit behind. Sometimes the response is coming in a little bit late. So we got all predictions in the 200s. Seems the low, almost mid 200s for Unbeaten Lake with 250. He's got the most bullish on his predictions with 250 in that. I am going to predict 1 passing touchdown and 205. I'm going to say 210 passing yards. 210 passing yards and 1 passing touchdown in this game. Let's move to your next one. How many rushing yards and how many rushing touchdowns will Auburn have in the Iron Bowl this year? This is your prediction for how many rushing yards and rushing touchdowns for Auburn in this game. Keep in mind, this is Jarquez, this is Damari, this is Jeremiah, this is Malcolm Simmons too, because he's been in the run game a little bit too. This is Peyton Thorne. This is whoever gets utilized in that facet. I have a feeling that we've got a few tricks that we have not shown yet that have been saving for this particular matchup because of its importance every year. Rushing yards for Auburn, 171 per game. Rushing yards allowed by Alabama, 143.5. Not a very large gap there. Will it meet in the middle? Will Auburn exceed, underperform, or however you want to phrase that? What say you? I need to pull this one down. So what are your predictions for rushing yards? I feel like we were very delayed on some of our responses too. So I think you guys need to make sure you're hitting that refresh button so you're getting you're getting caught up there. They're coming in. They're just like really delayed tonight. Tucker says 202 touchdowns for rushing attack for us in the Iron Bowl. TJ says 135 and 1 touchdown. I do think we're going to do well in the rushing game over time. Now, I wonder if we will struggle a little bit at the outset of that. Most Alabama fans will tell you that they're not super excited about their rushing defense. So that is an area we could exploit, but you have to exploit it. So there's that factor as well. 250 and 2. 150 and 2 touchdowns. We got 235 and 2. Tim's got 220 rushing and 2 touchdowns. I do feel good about 2 rushing touchdowns. I think we're going to get Jarquez one more. It says this is his only guaranteed Auburn game left. I have a feeling that he will get close to 100 yards, but come up just shy, like 95, 96, something like that, and probably like 17 carries, which wouldn't be a terrible day. I think Peyton's going to have to use his legs some in this game to get a few yards for us. And I also hope that we've got somebody. There's going to be a rushing touchdown from Jarquez, I think, and there's going to be a rushing touchdown from Peyton, from Mari, from Jeremiah, from Malcolm, from somebody we're not talking about that's utilized some way in the run game. So there we go. All right, our next category that we're going to move into offensively is going to be how many sacks allowed by Auburn in this game. How many sacks allowed by Auburn in this game? Meaning how many will their offensive line give up to quarterback Peyton Thorne and whoever else may play in there if there's an injury or a switch out or something like that. Not anticipating that at this time. Peyton's been playing pretty well down the stretch here, but obviously anything's possible. So we're talking about how many sacks will be reflected on Auburn's score stat sheet at the end of the Iron Bowl. This is something that has been, I feel like, up and down all year. This is something that's been very frustrating at times, especially early in the game. If this game reflects a lot like Georgia did at the beginning, I'm going to be very concerned, meaning that there are a lot of sacks given up to start off the game, which makes drives go in very quickly, which means we lose that field position battle, which gets Alabama even more energized. And if they make a big play, we're going to be starting off in a rough way. We got 2, 3, 3 or 4. You got to pick one, Tucker. It's none of this or stuff here. We got to get the definitive answers. A blind 5? Like they didn't see him coming? I know that's probably some take there I'm not thinking of. Yes, 1 sack is very optimistic, I think, but I love it. If Auburn gets out of there with 1 sack given up, we win the game, period. I'm going to predict a minimum of 3. I think I'm going to be optimistic about our guys a lot of them in their final game at Auburn wanting to show out. And I think, and this is not just about one unit we're talking about. We're talking about the whole team wanting to show up and show out and prove that they were getting better the entirety of this season. So Tucker finally settled in on 3. So I would agree with that it won't be super high, but I would wonder if they're going to come early in the game. Let's keep moving right along here. This is going to be the crucial one on the road. How many turnovers will Auburn's offense have in this game? How many interceptions and how many lost fumbles? We're not even just counting forced fumbles that they recovered fumbles. We're talking about forced fumbles that were gotten by the other team, interceptions. How many turnovers for Auburn in this game? Tough environment. Auburn's played in some other tough environments where they've done well with taking care of the ball, but it certainly is the Iron Bowl. It certainly is Alabama. They are going to be fever pitch to try to remain into this playoff hunt. We are going to be in a fever pitch, maybe over trying at times in certain areas to try to get bowl eligible. There's a lot on the table for both teams. So how many turnovers in this game do you see for Auburn's offense? I think there's going to be a minimum of 2, and I think that's going to be the difference of the game. We've so far only got ones coming in for everybody. I think there will be an interception. I do think it will be more so in the factor of there's a tip ball on a big hit or something like that that's picked off. Feels like we're due for one of those. And I just get the sense that there's going to be one fumble, probably like on special teams or something like that, which I'm not hoping for. I'm not wishing. Tucker is even more so with the 3. So I think you can anticipate some turnovers in this game, if nothing else, from the Auburn side of things. So we've got 1, 1, and 3 coming in right now. I'm sitting at 2. We'll make it an even 2 from everybody, averaging everybody that has responded in right now. I think Tucker, we already got his at 3 right there. All right, I told y'all we were going to move pretty quick here, so that's why it's good to get your response in fast. I would like to know, we're going to forego the who's the top rusher thing, because I think that's a foregone conclusion right now. So that's not what I'm asking. We all know that's going to be Jarquez outside of a crazy day from someone else. Who is going to be Auburn's top receiver in this game? We're going to move ahead to that one, because I think that's one that's a little bit more open-ended. Certainly for the few weeks leading up to the last 2 weeks, you would say KLS, because, and he's been the entire year that go-to wide receiver and still continues to be. But Cam Coleman, against an opponent you should do that type of a thing to, but then also against Texas A&M, who's supposed to have a pretty decent defense, looked pretty dang good. So you've got, I think, 2 prime candidates in Keandre, in Cam. But don't forget Malcolm Simmons. Don't forget everybody else that's out there. You know, I have been one that's really been hoping that we would see something special from Rivaldo Fairweather, who falls in this category too. Not that he's going to be getting the guy that's getting all of the big, down the field type of situations, but I wouldn't be shocked if covering KLS, covering Cam, bottling them up, things open up across the middle. For a guy like Rivaldo, is he someone that you might think about? Malcolm's another guy that can fit into that mold if they're keying off of a lot of other people. Even Robert Lewis's. We haven't seen a lot of Sam Jackson or Camden Brown in the latter part of the year, but certainly there's some options out there for you to think about. KLS, we got a Coleman. Tucker wants Robert Lewis. I do think Robert is also someone that falls into that Rivaldo category, where we thought we might get a little bit more statistically from him. But certainly, you're probably better served to predict a KLS. You're probably better served to pick a Cam Coleman. I'm going to predict I'm going to go with the easy one right now, and I'm going to hope that I'm somehow doing some like reverse jinx here. I'm going to predict KLS, and then it's actually going to force Cam Coleman to have 3 amazing games in a row. Because every time I pick KLS, he's still done well. So I feel like I'm not jinxing us in that way. I know that jinxes aren't real, but try to tell that to my sports riddled brain. Okay, final thing for offense. I told y'all we're going to keep moving fast. We're actually a little bit longer than I intended to be for you guys. In fact, let's skip ahead of that one real quick. We're going to go to defense. Defense. How many passing yards and how many passing touchdowns will Alabama have in this game? How many passing yards and how many passing touchdowns will Alabama have in this game? While you're thinking about that, post that in the chat right now. Let me give you some information. Passing yardage for Alabama per game right now is 238.6. The allowed passing yards for Auburn is 209.1. Not a humongous difference, about doing math, just under 30 yards difference. Do they meet in the middle? Does one exceed? Does one go way below what it normally does? Or way more than it normally does? What say you? But 238 to 209 is the comparison. 238 for Alabama passing, allowed 209. We got Tim coming in with 235 and 2 touchdowns. Keep in mind that Jalen has really been utilized a lot as a runner this year. So you got to wonder how that's going to factor into this matchup. Are they going to do what they feel like they have the most success with is running with him, but passing, certainly they're capable of some things. 221, 1 touchdown, 215, 1, 185, 2. Bryant's very hopeful that we can contain them. So I think they're going to break 200 passing. They're going to probably have at least one explosive passing play. They're going to be due for that type of thing at home. I hope it's not 2. If there's 2, I want, when I say explosive, I'm talking about 50 plus for a touchdown. If there's 2 of those, we're not going to win the game. 1 we can probably allow. So I'm going to say they pass the 200 mark and do 215 and 1 passing touchdown. 215 and 1 passing touchdown. All right, we're going to keep moving. Rolling right along here on your holiday weekend. How many rushing yards and how many rushing touchdowns for Alabama in this game? Post that right now in the chat for your predictions. Let us know what you think. Rushing yards and rushing touchdowns for Alabama in this game. Post that in the chat right now for those of you that are watching live. You can do it in the replay. Obviously, we can't really respond to you and your opinions that way, but we'll keep moving on. Keep in mind some stats. Miller and Milroe have both shared the load of the rushing. Milroe has had more of it. He is the leading rusher with 615 yards. Miller only has 557. Per game rushing, Alabama is getting 181. Auburn is allowing 110.2. Big discrepancy there. That may be your stat line to watch. And I think some of you have referenced it already. Can Auburn contain Milroe? But here's the thing. You can contain Milroe all day. If you let Miller go off, Jam Miller go off and do some stuff to you, it didn't really matter, did it? So shutting down, containing the running game entirely is going to be a huge thing for this game. Tucker with a 232, 75, and 1 touchdown from Tim Wood. I think we know where his prediction's going. I'm assuming 232, 3 touchdowns, 191 and 1 for Alabama, 150 and 1, 202 touchdowns. I think they're going to have a pretty good rushing day over time. I think Auburn's very nice 110 rushing yardage allowed per game is going to take a big hit. I will go ahead and predict they break 200. I'll just say an even 200 rushing yards for 3 touchdowns. I think that's going to be the thing. I'm going to say 2, and I've kind of already thought about my score previous to this because if you've seen my appearance on a few other shows this week, I've kind of already given it, and I think I'll stick with it. So I'm trying to kind of make it make sense in my head for that score prediction. And so for that, I'm going to say 2 passing touchdowns. Okay, let's keep moving. We're just going to ask one more defense thing. And this is on the defense for Auburn. Who will be Auburn's top tackler in this game? Now, you might say this is another one of those that might be easy because, as we read off, the top tackler is Mausi. But it's not always the case that he's the top tackler. He's just had a very good series of games throughout the year. But he shows up there a lot. So, who is your top tackler for Auburn in this game, however you deem that? Is it total tackles? Is it tackles plus the other stuff, the pass breakups, the forced fumbles, the quarterback hurries, things like that? Mausi leads with 48. Thompson leads with 42. And McLeod leads with 35 for Auburn. That's a linebacker, an edge, and a defensive back, or a safety to be more specific. So that gives you a perspective that it's across the board where we're getting that production from. Who is your top tackler for Auburn in this matchup? Who do you have? I have been very adamant about you should pick Mausi. And I think he will continue to be at the top of the charts no matter what, like close to it. But Jaron Thompson has also come along, and used to, when I saw people, defensive backs, showing up a lot in the tackle area, that concerns me. But I also think that you have to think about how they utilize these safeties sometimes. Jaron Thompson has come in a little bit fast on some blitzes and been able to wreak havoc. So I think that's really contributed it. So when I think about how they're going to utilize him and how he showed up at the top tackler spot, I'm going to predict Jaron Thompson in his final game for us is going to be our top tackler. We've got one from OC, Jay Crawford. We haven't heard one of those in a while, even though he's been doing great things just holding down that corner spot. That's certainly a new prediction that we have, Jay Crawford there. Okay. So there's a few predictions coming in for that. I'm going to predict Jaron Thompson not only leads tackling, he needs 6 to pass Mausi as the top tackler. I'm going to predict he does it, because I think he's going to have to stop some of those runners breaking into the second level of our defense, and that could get a little bit dicey. All right, we're going to do a few special teams here, and then we're going to move on and do our score predictions here. Let's do the all-important one for special teams. This one could be the make or break for both teams, but we're going to do it for Auburn only. How many field goals attempted and made, or made and attempted, I guess you're going to write it that way, made and attempted for Auburn versus Alabama? How many attempts, how many makes, field goals wise? Obviously, Ian Vachon is the new guy. Got to keep that in mind. Alex McPherson is no longer, looks like he's playing for the year. Looks like he's done. And Towns Magoo has been on kickoffs right now. So I think you were talking about Ian Vachon. How many will be attempted and made? We got 2 for 2 from Tim. Very, very optimistic about it. 3 for 5. TJ, if we are attempting 5 field goals, we will lose the game, in my opinion. Even with those 3 makes, because that is 5 opportunities where we did not get a touchdown. We have to score touchdowns. We just got to even 4 here. So Travis, give me a 4 plus what, a 4 and a however many, 4 of 4 or whatever. 2 of 4, 2 of 3. I do think that we're going to attempt a lot of field goals in this game, because I do think our offense will face some adversity and stymie out a little bit at times. But if we have to attempt 5 field goals, I think we've lost the game, even if we make all 5. Because that you've got to score and keep the score up on Alabama here. I'm going to predict we go 2 of 3 in this one. I'm trying to make the math work in my head for what I had as my score prediction. Yeah, that's going to be a little bit different. So my score is going to not line up exactly with what I've said here tonight, but I'll still stick with it. 2 for 2 for Auburn, 1 for 2 for Alabama. We seem to be the ones having the kicking issues this year. All right, one final thing within the special teams category, even though it's just a miscellaneous, because I do think that this will be crucial. And we all know that a certain thing happens in the Iron Bowl a lot, or doesn't happen. For Auburn, how many penalties and yards for Auburn? How many penalties and yards for Auburn? So think about what we've been prone to do. Think about the magnitude of this game, emotions running high. Think about those things. Think about if you think there's something going on with the refs in the Iron Bowl. How many penalties and how many penalty yards will Auburn have in this game? Small things, small categories like this, I think are going to be humongous in determining what's going to happen in this game. I feel like that Auburn is going to be due for a few false starts. We showed that, unfortunately, at times this year. In this crowd, in this environment, with that context, it's going to get a little bit tough for them. So I'm expecting at least 2 false starts. I'm going to expect a holding or 2 gets called on us. So that's already 4 penalties right there. I think there's going to be a personal foul of some type, pass interference, something to that effect. So I'm at 5 already, it seems like. There's going to be something else, or just, we've had our fair share of crazy things like the was it not covering up a defense or illegal pick or something like that. It feels like that's going to happen a little bit. So I'm going to predict there's going to be 6 penalties for like 55 yards. I don't know if that math works out, but certainly I think we're going to have that. 4 for 35, Deshaun is saying about 5 false starts. If we have 5 false starts, we'll lose the game. I'm going to stand on that prediction right there. 3 for 50. So with that math, Bryant, that is, if you did 3 personal fouls, 15 yards, you're almost at 50. So I think your math doesn't work exactly because that's the furthest yardage you can get, if I'm not mistaken. So you might have to have a 4th one for a false start or offsides. Offsides may be something we need to think about in this game with us wanting to get after Milroe. But there you go. All right, so I know we did a shorter version on the information. We did a shorter version on offense, defense, special teams. I do want to go ahead and move into our predictions, our official score predictions part of the show. A lot of you have been waiting to do this. Right now, your predictions for the 89th edition of the Iron Bowl in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, Bryant-Denny Stadium. What say you? Auburn, Alabama, the final score and the winner. I need that in the chat from you for those of you that are watching live. If you're watching the replay, feel free to share that as well so you can lock in your score and say you were either really right or really wrong. What say you? While you're doing that, I'll give you, again, some explanation of where I've been on this. And I explained this. Yes, Tucker, that was for you, Tuscaloosa. I explained this, that I appeared on a couple of Alabama shows this week. By the way, had a great time on there. The Voice of College Football Network channel. It's a network of shows. They have an Alabama channel. I appeared on there with several of their commentators. Had a great time. Also appeared on Herb and Reg's show. You can find, I've posted some links on our social media if you want to go watch those things. So I gave them all a prediction early because they requested it much earlier than I normally do, and I reserved the right to change it. That prediction at that time of earlier in the week, Monday and Tuesday, was 31-23 Alabama. Thinking about it as we've been talking through it, I don't really see a reason to change that right now. While I do think Auburn will play a game that is going to be impressive in most rights, I do think they're going to make one too many mistakes, whether that's the number of explosive plays, turnovers, get hit with the penalty bug. There is some of those constant battles that we've had all this year. At times, maybe some of them have gotten better. Will rear their ugly heads at times, but maybe not overly so. But it's going to be enough on the road. Their context of trying to get into the playoff, our context of trying to get into playoff to a bowl game. So much on the line for both teams. I think we're in line for an epic Iron Bowl, and I hope so, because I think that's what we all deep down, even though we want to kill each other, hope for. We got 31-28 Alabama. We've got 28-24 Auburn. We have got 34-28. We run a last-second field goal back to win the game, so that's an Auburn. We've got a 34-31 Auburn. We've got a 31-28 Auburn by a shaky field goal. Can't take any shaky things right now. Travis, I'm not understanding. So 25 plus 28. So 53. I think you meant 25-28 Alabama and meant that to be a hyphen. Let us know if you're watching still, Travis, what you meant by that. Tim says 27 Auburn, 24 Alabama. Auburn is improving, and I look for our defense to have a great game. Certainly that is a high possibility. Does the score match that storyline? Only time will tell. So if you've got any other thoughts, questions, comments, topics about the Iron Bowl, drop them in now. It's your last opportunity to do so because, folks, this is the last preview show that we're going to do this season, barring something special tomorrow. Now, the reminder, we will have a post-game show. It will be, in most likelihood, right after the game. So please join us if you can. We'd love to have you sit in with us and talk a little bit about it. Hopefully we're having a celebration and not a therapy session. But either way, we will talk about it. Stay tuned. Right after the game, we'll be making that watch page for you later tonight. So you can go ahead and hit the like button, hit the notify me bell button, so you are ready to go to be celebrating, so you are ready to go to be having therapy with us, whichever it is. And we will also have our regularly scheduled programs start to get back in line here. Sunday night show at 9 p.m. Eastern time for the Auburn Experience, episode 105. Don't miss it. Got lots of stuff this week, basketball and much more. Okay, any final thoughts, questions, derogatory rebuttals? What else do you have? Deshaun says defense is going to win it. I think Bama makes a lot of penalties also. They can make a lot of penalties, but they have to have them called, Deshaun. So remember that. It is Tuscaloosa. Let's be thankful that the Iron Bowl is not held on Black Friday anymore. I know so many of you lamented that. I'll be honest with you, I didn't hate it. But certainly the Iron Bowl is best played on a Saturday because it deserves that primetime spot with nobody else competing for them, because it is the best rivalry in college football, in college sports, and in the world, bar none. I will win that argument every single time with anybody. Michigan fans, Ohio State fans, don't care who you are, Duke, North Carolina basketball, you ain't got nothing on the holistic, complete, house divided, friends divided, Iron Bowl that is the greatest rivalry in sports. And I mean that with respect to our Alabama fans as well. All right, folks, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for staying with us, and thank you for letting me do this on the road, not in our complete audio, lighting, setup, background. But thanks so much for hanging out with us tonight and being part of our little family within the Auburn family. We appreciate you being here and hanging out with us, and we are wishing good luck to our Tigers tomorrow as they go battle in the 89th Iron Bowl. Good luck to them. Go Tigers, War Eagle, beat the Tide.